Working Drummer.
Now kick it.
This is the Working Drummer Podcast, serving up perspectives, experiences, and stories from ground-level working pros. Advice, tips, and secrets on how to build a career in the music business.
Hey everyone, this is Matthew Krause, and you are listening to the podcast Working Drummer. Today, my guests are drummers, drum techs, and entrepreneurs Harry McCarthy and John Hall. Harry has offered his technical skills on the road and in the studio for many major artists, from Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, the Eagles, Eric Clapton, Neil Young, Mark Knopfler, Carly Simon, Hall & Oates, and most recently, Keith Urban. In 1989, he started his Cartage company, Drum Paradise, in Los Angeles, and in 1994, relocated to Nashville, Tennessee, where he established Drum Paradise Nashville. John Hall is best known as the drum tech for Rich Redmond. After finishing college and relocating to Nashville, he began working as a drum tech almost right away, on tours as well as in the studio. He has worked with such artists as Jason Aldean, Paramore, OAR, Young the Giant, Story of the Year, and many others. Harry and John's latest venture is the Drum Pad, a new teaching facility for drummers of any age or skill level. As always, you can find us at workingdrummer.net to find out more information about this episode and all the episodes that we've done so far in the last 3.5 years. Subscribe to us on iTunes. You can find us now on YouTube. We are slowly building our library of past episodes. When you're on iTunes, please subscribe. This helps us grow. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook. If you use the hashtag WorkingDrummer, we'll include you on Instagram and our stories. If you want to support what Zach and I are doing here at the Working Drummer Podcast, there's a couple ways that you can do that. On the homepage of our website, workingdrummer.net, you can find a button for PayPal. There's also a button that is a link to our Patreon page. Patreon is an easy and convenient way to support the podcast on a regular basis. Donations start at $1, and you have access to the bonus material that we're providing on a monthly basis from past guests. As always, any donation in any amount is greatly appreciated. Here it is, my conversation with Harry McCarthy and John Hall.
I tech for Rich out on the Jason Aldean tour, as you both know. And we just kicked the tour off 3 weeks ago now. We've been in rehearsals for the last month or so, getting, all the production ready, getting the band, getting the dust.
What's involved? We'll get into the tech thing, but what's involved in preparing for a tour?
On our end, not as much. Our band is, they've been playing with Jason together for over a decade now.
Yeah.
So, those guys are pretty much ready to go at all times for touring. So we'll usually go in for maybe 2 or 3 days with the band, and they'll play through the songs a few times, just kind of get the dust off and get the juices rolling again. And then the time consuming part of the rehearsals is the production rehearsals, where we go in. They have to program the lighting and video and everything for the live show. Which means the band has to go in, basically play the show down, and our front of house guy will record it, send it to the light programmers and the content designers, and then they will work on the content. The band will come back in, play down the show. They'll take their notes, see how it's working with the live performance. They'll do the same thing. So, it takes a couple weeks to get everything dialed in and, make sure the production looks right with, the show designer and everything else. And
how do those changes in production affect you?
Not really at all.
Really? Okay.
That's
a lot of trips to catering.
Yeah. Well,
put on a few pounds.
Yeah. So, our prep work is done, Harry can attest to this, our prep work is done with the band before that. So the idea is, for the band to be ready, so when we go into those full production rehearsals, there's no, we got to figure out what guitar we're going to play on this song, and how do the drums sound, and how's the band sound. Like, we come in, we're dialed.
Yeah.
So we do our thing, and it's all about, content design. Yeah. So we don't want to be the holdup. Like, hang on the, design in here, guys. We got to, build some looms, or, figure out, like, we have to have all the kinks, like all the little bugs worked out. So we're pretty much show ready when we go into those rehearsals.
Is there a union thing involved in the time constraints of production rehearsal?
Somewhat, like when we do load in, like obviously sometimes that can affect it, but it's usually spread out. I mean, it's not like a show day where we're like, we have, 6 hours to come in and load in everything and done. Like they'll block out a rehearsal facility for, 2 or 3 weeks. So they can come in and take their time and, make sure all the trussing is the right length and, the weight capacity of the ceiling in the venue. And
they usually allow a few days prior to the band coming in.
Yeah.
To get everything up and running.
Yeah, I mean, they were in full production rehearsals for almost 2 weeks before our band even went in to do the show.
Oh, yeah. So those guys work, man.
Yeah.
So hard.
Long,
it's amazing.
long days and hot days. And for those guys. So.
Yeah. And then how long does the tour go?
This year's a pretty light touring year.
Okay.
We'll finish up the first week of October. Second week of October, I guess. Our last tour date is, I think, September 29th. And then we have a week and a half off and we go do one stadium show in Texas. And then that'll be it for touring for the year as of now.
Yeah.
There's talk of a new album. There's been whispers of that, so I don't know if we're going to have some media at the end of the tour, but we'll play that by ear.
So with an organization like Jason Aldean, I'm guessing things pop up from time to time aside from what's on the book schedule-wise.
Yeah.
And when you have a committed group like his band and everybody that surrounds that organization, you guys can make plans after the tour is done, but also know that, hey, we got a chance to play on Jimmy Fallon next month, put it on the books.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's just something to be conscious about. Like,
yes.
Usually December, January, I mean, it's pretty dark these days on our tour. But, from the end of the tour up until holiday season and then after January, like, be mindful that something might come up.
Right.
I think with any artist, you got to be ready to go. Hey, I'm back.
And we're back.
That's good. There you go.
I mean, I know I work with Keith Urban these days, and he's usually adds something will come up.
Right. Yeah. Right.
TV show or a local show at Opry or the Ryman or benefit for somebody in town.
Sure. And that's the thing about like living in a town where there's so much coming out of here in New York. There's touring, tours are emanating from here. Production is emanating. A lot of the artists live here. The band lives here. And I think the chance to like do things like the Opry, or I remember a few years ago when Keith played downtown on Lower Broad, kind of like almost like this stunt
pop-ups.
Yeah, you got to be ready. So what's been happening now? You had some issues, some just like life things with kidney stones.
Yeah, I was pretty sick. A few months ago, but I turned it into a positive. And
that's awesome.
Taking better care of myself.
Right.
Which is, it jump-started me to go, I don't want to be this sick. Especially traveling.
No, it's the worst being sick out on the road. Yeah.
But this year, Keith, it's kind of a light year. He's working on a record, and we're playing pretty much weekends.
Okay. And Seth Rausch is the drummer for Keith.
Yeah.
And you've been working with Keith since before Seth.
Chris McHugh brought me into the organization, which was great. I work with Chris locally at here at Drum Paradise.
Yeah.
Or downstairs. We're at the drum pad.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's been going great.
Yeah.
I enjoy working with Seth, and Chris was awesome too.
Yeah. So light year, let's get into a couple things. So we're at Drum Paradise and we're in the drum pad, which is connected to Drum Paradise. So let's talk a little bit about the drum pad and what it is and kind of what you guys are doing to create something that is a resource for drummers, is a resource for...
Yeah, I'll let John follow me up on this, but I had this space here available. I used to have a tenant up here, and I was trying to think what I could do to go hand in hand with Drum Paradise, and decided to open up a couple of practice rooms. There's a small practice room with 2 drum kits,
right,
and the bigger room that we're in right now, I thought it would be a great idea to have master classes,
right, with
some of the guys we both work with in town, or guys that are coming through Nashville on tour if they have a day off. A teaching facility, more intimate and more personalized as opposed to a big drum clinic.
Yeah, it's a decent sized room, and like we had around 25.
Yeah, that's about the
people
limit
in our 200th episode, which was great. And so when you have these masters, so upcoming master classes,
we have Todd Zuckerman,
right,
from Styx. He'll be in June 11th.
June 11th,
and then following up that a few weeks later is Chad Cromwell,
right,
June 28th.
So, I mean, here's an opportunity to get in, and it's very limited seating, but the advantage is you get this really personal one-on-one with these people that we've been following for years and see online, and it's just great to have that with both these players.
Yeah, there is something to be said for the intimacy of it, or the size of it, mm-hmm. because we've all been at bigger drum clinics, and when they go to the Q&A, it could just take a different direction, and it eats up a lot of time. This seems to be a little bit more on point, mm-hmm. and one-on-one with who's here.
Yeah. If somebody's passing through town, or maybe they just moved to town, and they need a place to rehearse for whatever reason, that's something you guys offer as well, or a place to teach.
Yeah. Not as much as like having a band come in and rehearse.
Yeah.
But if you're a drummer, you have a session or an audition or something coming, something coming up like that. There's. We have the facility in here with drum sets already set up. Yeah. So, I mean, you can walk in with your sticks.
Walk in with your stick.
And you're playing, now. You don't have to load in and bring your gear. I mean, there's a lot of, practice facilities, but you have to bring your own gear. And so we want to offer, a pretty, just a easy experience for, I just need to go practice for an hour. I've got 5 songs I'm going to record at a session, and I've got the demos, and I just need to, run through them really quick. You can come in and spend your hour playing, mm-hmm. and not 30 minutes loading your gear in and out and, rushing through your practice session.
Right. Yeah. That's awesome. Tell us about Drum Paradise and what Drum Paradise is. Well, currently, the way it is now.
Yeah, currently it's a facility here in Nashville. I warehouse probably 30 to 40 clients, drummers that keep their equipment with us. If they have a session, they'll call us, and we literally will check the gear before it goes out. If there's any drum head changes that need to be done, it's a personalized service. That's kind of was the concept when I started it years ago. It's
more than just like, oh, your gear needs to get there. Here's the cases with this guy's name on it, and throw it in the truck and then drop it off. There's more to it than that.
Yeah. Years ago when I started it in Los Angeles, I saw a need for the service end of it. I worked at a Cartage company there that did drums, keyboards, guitars, and moved all kinds of musical equipment. And the drummers would definitely need stuff done to their kits. Mm-hmm. And some guys like to do their own work, and others don't want to deal with it. But when I started my company, I figured, hey, give me your business. I'll take good care of your equipment like it's my own. As far as the setups go, they would come in and would map it all out, set it up. Some guys like to use a carpet, some don't. But basically, if we're going to do a session for you, prior to it, I'll have all your specs where exactly what cymbals you want to use, what snare drum you like to start with, and where you can literally drive to the studio and you're going to walk in and it's going to be
Right.
very, very close to you setting it up yourself.
Time is money, so much so,
Yeah.
especially in a town like Nashville or any place where there's a lot of production happening. And if you're spending time setting stuff up, it's just I imagine.
It's good to get a jump on it. We like to get the kits in the night before.
Oh, okay.
Or if it's an evening session a little bit later in the day, usually the studio will allow us to get in, get the kit set up, and they get a jump on it too, and they can mic it up.
Yeah.
Getting back to Drum Paradise, what we do is, aside from having drummer clients,
Right. Yeah.
we also do drum rentals. So if you're a band coming into Nashville to track, it's more cost effective to rent as opposed to freighting in all of your backline.
And you guys have everything.
We have a nice selection of equipment.
So I have to say this. I was talking to my wife about our conversation today, and she said, "Is it truly Drum Paradise?" I said, "Yes, it is." Matter of fact, I have some pictures on my phone still from last time I was here, and she's like, "Okay."
Yeah, the warehouse is...
It's amazing.
I mean, it feels good when you walk in the
Yeah.
warehouse. I've had a lot of people come through and go, "Wow, this really is Drum Paradise."
Yeah.
We have a lot of kits and a lot of vintage stuff.
Yeah.
And I've been at it a long time, so it's been a good run.
So you started in 1989 in Los Angeles with the
Yes.
first.
I started Drum Paradise with Jeff Chonis, who's Ringo Starr's drum tech, and we teamed up years ago in LA. He was working with Kenny Aronoff, and I had Harvey Mason and Luis Conti and Tristan Bowden, and we really, we teamed up and we pulled our resources, and it was a great thing. And the whole time, Matt was keeping in mind personalized service, because there's a lot of components and moving parts, not literally moving, but setting up a drum kit.
What would be an example of something that's personable that you do that
It's
maybe
something as simple as, if you're going to come in and I'm working for you, that your snare throw off is in the right spot. Most guys like it at 9 o'clock. Few like it at 6 o'clock, but something.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Something that simple.
Yeah.
Usually, when you see somebody sit at a drum kit, and John would attest to this, most drummers like to fidget anyway, and they'll just touch something but not really move it. They have to go through the motions, and you can relate. But our whole thing is set it up so we nail it.
Yeah.
And that's been a good thing, like people appreciate that our clients.
And I imagine some of it is mechanical. You can set memory locks, you can have a picture, you can have whatever, but just the experience or knowing the drummer and be able to sit behind it and have a feel of, okay, this is the way Chad Cromwell likes his rack tom. I just know that.
Yeah, it's a feel thing. We know when we set up drums, it's more of a feel thing. When you sit behind a kit, and it's very, for your listeners, it's real basic stuff though, like something as simple as the muffling in the kick drum. When you're, when you hit the kick bass drum the first time, you want to make sure the padding is where it needs to be.
Yeah.
Where you don't have to get out and bend down and
yeah.
Stuff like that. Your hi-hat, if it's in the right place in relation to the snare drum. But yeah, memory locks and all that stuff, makes it easier.
And you have a crew that's working here as well.
I have a small crew. John Michael Brady's been with me a long time. He literally does the daily scheduling and runs it. So that allows me to travel and do other things.
Right.
And we have a couple other guys that come in, Travis and Travis. We call them T1, T2. But they work. Normally, Matt, we're ahead of the game getting equipment in. So, sorry, I didn't shut my phone off. Oh, hang on. I got to go set up some drums.
It may be.
The guys will come in at 3, 4 o'clock, load up, and go.
Yeah.
Delivering drums for this evening or for the morning, and then rounding up and picking up for sessions that were earlier in the day.
Yeah. Was there a point in which maybe you were in LA and you're like, I'm good at this. I know I can do this. Was there something, an epiphany, something that triggered this decision to feel like you could step out on your own or in partnership?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that, because there's probably a lot of drummers out there wondering, drum tech or Cartage? Like, first of all, when I moved to LA years ago, Rick Marotta and Jerry Marotta, my buddies, I grew up in the same neighborhood, but Rick was going out to LA to do some work, and I guess he needed a car taken out there, and he asked me if I could drive it out, and hey, maybe you should stay out there. Long story short, I did decide to stay out there and wanted to work, and through friends of a friend, I got a job at a Cartage company called Leeds Instrument Rentals, and they did Cartage for many top players out there. But me being from New York, that was the first time I was exposed to a Cartage company moving equipment for professional musicians, and I'm like, I never had heard of that. Like,
is there a history of that kind of thing? I mean, like, when did this? Do you remember when that kind of thing started?
You know, that's a good question, because Hal Blaine, rest in peace, I asked him a few years back when he did it in the 60s, late 60s. I was really curious about, hey, Hal, how did you get your drums from place to place? And he's working 2 sessions, 3 sessions a day back in the day. He told me he had one individual, younger kid working with him, and he had keys to all the studios. Think about that. They trusted him to go in and leapfrog drum kits from studio to studio.
I mean, that sounds like an exceptional situation.
It was
for one player.
I don't know when SIR started, but as we know, there's quite a few companies that move musical equipment. But to answer your question, I worked at this company, and I was amazed that, wow, like, these guys don't set up their own stuff. They just drive to the studio, and boom, it's all there. Worked there for a while, and they had some really high-profile clients, Carlos Vega, Harvey Mason, some of the Toto guys, and I really gravitated to, I really enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. Like, yes, in a perfect world, I would love to have played drums. We all have aspirations of playing in the studio and on records, but when you see the guys that are doing it, when I got out there, John Robinson, Jeff, the list is a mile long of the guys.
Porcaro.
Yeah, the guys that just
hardly any competition.
Yeah, exactly. Like, no, I think I'll stick to setting drums up. But I decided, Matt, to break out and do it for myself. And how I built it is to just try and go the extra mile, or a little bit more distance for the needs of the drummer.
Offer something unique that maybe someone else wouldn't do.
That makes all the difference, though.
I like the story of how you met Rich. Can you briefly recall that again?
Sure. Yeah.
I love that.
I haven't heard this one.
Yeah. There's a cry for help.
Oh.
No, we met at the PASIC convention in Indianapolis, 2011.
Okay.
I was with a indoor drumline, Rhythm X out of Columbus, Ohio. And he was doing just his regular drum clinic. He does dozens a year. But we did a introduction to indoor drumline clinic. So it was our whole drumline. We did an hour, basically, question and answer, and demonstrate how we run our rehearsals and how the writers arrange the snare line parts and the bass line parts and things like that. And I met Rich the night before we did our clinic, and he was a Nashville guy. I had aspired to move to Nashville to pursue the music industry and play drums. And so I approached him after the clinic and said, introduced myself, and hey, I'm a drummer. I'll be finishing up college, and you're a marching guy. I'm in a drum line. You should come check us out at 8 in the morning tomorrow. And he's like, I'll be there, buddy. And, he came out, and he's like, that's really cool, man. And we just kind of hit it off and chatted. And I gave him my little spiel about, being a college student, moving to Nashville, needing internship hours. And basically said, when I move, put me to work. And of course he had, he was really busy at the time, playing on a lot of records. He had his production company called New Voice Entertainment,
Right.
Which was him and two of the other members of Jason's band, the guitar player Kurt and bass player Tully. And they produced Lindsay L. and Thompson Square, and they produced a few number ones, and so they were really busy all the time, bouncing from studio to studio, and so he, put me to work. I called him when I got to Nashville and said, "Hey, I'm here. I have nothing to do except work." So he took me up and put me to work, and here we are.
There's an aspect of when you first met him that I thought was really interesting. So there's a line of people after Rich's clinic that are waiting to see him, talk to him, get an autograph. And as the line was growing, you kept going to the back of the line, hoping that would buy you the time that you needed to assert yourself.
Yeah.
And sneaky. Yeah. Smart.
Giving all my secrets away.
Yeah.
Well, on Rich's podcast, he talks about that could have gone one of two ways. It could have been like, I'm out of time. I got to go. Yeah. But you kind of hedged your bets and said, I'm going to try this. So you asserted yourself, and that I think, with somebody like, there's so many of us in the community know Rich Redmond and know his personality and just having this energy about him, that he recognized that in you right off the bat. And you continue to be that way in many ways, asserting yourself and finding ways to juggle many different things, which we'll talk about. But where did that come from? Where do you think you maybe learned that, or knew that was an important skill to have or to develop?
I don't necessarily know that it was a conscious thing necessarily, but it came from a genuine place.
Okay.
I didn't know very much about Rich at the time.
Yeah.
I didn't, really grow up listening to country music, but I knew,
because we're both from Central Ohio.
Right.
We don't know anything about country music.
Yeah. I knew who Jason Aldean was. Yeah. I knew he's, successful country artist, and Rich is very involved in the drumming community, as, everybody knows.
Right.
He's had a long relationship with Modern Drummer and other drum magazines. So he writes a lot of articles for Modern Drummer, and he's been in Modern Drummer numerous times. So I kind of knew who he was, and that struck my curiosity more than anything. It's like, well, this guy is all over the map. Why don't I know anything about him? So going to see the clinic and stuff really opened my eyes to like, oh, this, he's got his crap together, and he's a huge personality, super nice guy. So I wanted, a piece of that, just like everybody else that, knows who Rich is. I approached it from like, man, you've, very intelligent guy, and he's crafted, his own path to the music industry. So,
But John, you were thinking more in the lines of drummer to drummer.
Yeah, sure.
Not, hey, maybe I can work for him.
Right. Yeah. It wasn't. It wasn't
took on
like
its own thing once you guys
very
met.
much. Very much.
Which is interesting in itself. Yeah.
Yeah. It's more of an educational approach. Like, I wanted to, like, how did you do it? You know, what's your story? I would love to, you know.
There's a handful of stories and examples of people that have found mentors and followed them around in one capacity or another. The name is escaping me, but who interned with Chris McHugh, and my brain is not working. But what is like one of the biggest takeaways that you have taken from your experience with Rich?
I mean, there's a lot, but I think an important one is, like, learn from the guys who've been doing it since you've been born. You know, there's a reason why guys that have been around 20 plus years that are still doing it. There's a reason why they're still doing it. So, you know, learn from that. You know, ask questions, and I mean, people are more than willing to share their experience and tell their story. And you know, it's the same getting to know Harry, you know, here through the drum pad, and just, you know, in the music community in general. Another great example, you know, a guy that's been doing it for longer than I've been alive. You know, there's a lot to take away from that. So,
yeah, I in an age of information, it's sometimes harder to figure out what's going on because there's so much noise that I think people would be surprised how approachable most people are. And I hear story after story on this podcast of drummers that go to a situation, they go to see a band, and they think, this is what I want to be a part of. Maybe not that band, maybe it's the genre, maybe it's a studio player that they want to emulate, maybe it's something, and they say, hey, can I buy you coffee? I mean, I know that sounds the typical thing, but I mean, you mentioned this came from an honest place. This came from a sincere place, and Rich recognized that. And I think that people do recognize that sincerity that comes from, I want to be a part of this. I'm hungry. How can I learn from you? And I think, you know, I have yet to meet somebody that is hesitant to talk about, yeah, sure. Wow, you're interested in, and why would you be interested in me?
Yeah.
Well, Chad Cromwell, you've been on these records.
Well, I think another thing too is everybody has had help along the way.
Right.
So, you know, the natural progression is to
giving back is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Making yourself available and accessible to somebody who's moved to town. I get quite a few calls of young drummer, hey, would it be possible to come by and meet you or have lunch or grab a coffee? And I really try, and I have no idea who the person is, and I'll make myself available to just, you know, spend some time with somebody.
And who doesn't like a sandwich or a good cup of coffee?
No, I usually buy.
I
usually buy lunch.
You're investing in people. I mean, we're doing that, and you continue to do so. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's just trying to be nice and get along and
trying.
Well, everybody's trying to do the same thing, and there's plenty of room for everybody. You know, so there's no reason to try to you know, put everything in a jar and put the lid on, and there's no secrets, you know. So
briefly tell us what it is that you're doing when you're teching for Rich, say for example on a tour. Can you sum it up and a lot of this has been covered, but for anybody that's just meeting you for the first time through this, what is a drum tech? What does John Hall do for Rich Redmond?
In a nutshell, you're simplifying the day to where, he can walk to the stage, you hand him a pair of sticks, plug in his ears, and he's
down to
present.
you're handing him his sticks.
Yes.
He's not walking in with his own sticks.
Yeah, usually
Seth
let him walk in with his own sticks.
Seth picks up his own sticks.
Yeah. See, I give Rich sticks in the afternoon.
Rich requires John.
Yeah, it's very needy.
Sticks, please.
Very needy. Not at all. No, he likes to warm up with the sticks that he's going to start the show with.
Yeah.
So he has a practice pad backstage, and I give him those sticks a couple hours before the show.
Yeah.
So he can, diddle around and noodle and play on road cases and walls. And
John, will you help dial in his monitor mix prior to sound check?
yeah. If we need any changes, the age of digital consoles.
Hey man, this is my show. Okay.
Oh, sorry, I'm not supposed to be asking questions. I'm just curious.
No questions.
So Matt, what year did you start? No.
Last year.
Yeah, but we've had our monitor engineer Evan has worked with Jason for I want to say 13 years now. He was employee number 1.
Yeah.
So he's been there forever. So he knows the guys. And the age of digital consoles, everything is saved.
Matt, that's a key part
to a T.
Of going on tour and playing different venues.
Yeah.
Because the sound will change venue to venue. So for a drummer to be real comfortable, I was just curious about how far you go for Rich.
Yeah, when needed. We have our monitor, Evan is great, so he knows what the guys like to hear, so usually he'll get a really good start. But if there's anything that stands out, when we line check or, before the band goes out the sound check, I'll tell him, like, hey, he's probably going to want a little bit more kick drum in his mix today, or a little more click, or,
And every day is different because you're in different venues, different locations, you're playing acoustic instruments.
Yeah.
So to create consistency for the drummer, you have to go in and deal with the environment in which you're playing, whether it's a TV show or an outdoor venue.
Yeah, and Harry can attest to this. All of that starts before the sound even gets to the microphones.
Sure.
I try to make sure Rich's drum set sounds exactly the same without having put the ears in. You sit down and play through everything. Okay, this sounds like it should. Now let's see how it translates to the mix, and if things need adjusted from there. But
and
that's kind of my take. There
are some gigs where they'll fly in with no sound check.
Yeah.
So the shit better be ready to go.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's saying. Even if it's not a fly-in date, like there's some venues that are just difficult to bring a production in. So we might be pushed back till 4 or 5 o'clock getting, everything ready on stage. So the band doesn't have a chance to come in and sound check, so.
And your day starts early.
It's a long day.
Sometimes early, but yeah, it's a long. Our day goes late more than starting early, I would say, because Backline's the last guys in on the stage. So
because there's lighting, there's stage.
Yeah.
Right.
So depending on how the production load in goes in that day, we might be sitting around waiting for a couple hours, waiting so we can dump our truck and get our gear in. So that kind of varies day to day. But once you start, we're pretty much, we go until the show's over.
Right.
We get through sound check. And I'm not sure about Keith's tour, but we have a VIP experience where Jason and the band will play a small acoustic set.
Oh, wow.
Usually around dinner time. So we'll finish sound check. We'll go set up the VIP gig, and then we'll have a little bit of time. We can grab some dinner, and then we go do the VIP gig, acoustic gig, strike that, break it down, and then get back, get a set list ready for the show, and get your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and set change and showtime.
Making sure electronics work, have backups to the electronics.
Yeah.
So, there's so much behind the scenes that I don't think people realize, even those that are interested in working in the business. We see so much of the presentation that you forget. There's opportunities for work and being involved in this industry, which we all love, and the people that we get to work with that are available, hopefully we'll be able to shed some light on some of these things.
Yeah. How big is your crew out with Keith Urban? How many guys do you have on the road?
On a touring year, probably about 70, 80. When I was out working for Max Weinberg for many years, it was over 100.
Right.
And when I started that job, I'll never forget a guitar tech who was there for a long time. He said, make sure you have a spare for the spare.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I never forgot that. So if you're using your spare, you better have a backup.
Yeah.
Because
so what kind of spin? There's the obvious. There's
couple
the
of
snare
foot pedals, couple of snare drums.
Yeah.
I mean, believe it or not, I had a seat break on me during a show once, and it traumatized me. Max was playing, and it was the third song in, big show, Springsteen, obviously. Next thing I know, I see Max kind of like falling to one side, leaning on his floor tom. His seat broke. Think about that. You may as well just have another drum kit underneath the stage.
Right. Anything can go.
That's in all my years, I've never.
How did you handle that?
Before I could get another seat up there, one of the keyboard techs just ran a seat out because he saw it happen. You know, and everybody was scrambling.
Yeah.
But I guess as a backline tech, not just a drum tech, you want to avoid anything that's going to be a showstopper, at least for drums. A bass drum head, we can change out a pedal, we could change out a snare drum, but you don't want the backbeat to stop.
Yeah, we got a kind of running joke on our bus. On Jason's tour, Backline and Audio ride on the same bus, and our kind of running joke is, if something on our end breaks, it's a showstopper. Like, we refund tickets. So you can't have that
for an artist to literally have to stop playing. I mean, thank you, Lord, that's never happened to me during a show, and I've 37 years where the show literally, like, the artist would have to say, hold on a minute, we got a technical problem. That's what
not for these tours.
Yeah, when you look out.
I mean, we'll have
for a stadium show.
Yeah, I mean, Rich breaks snare heads, not often, but most of the time he'll blow out the bottom snare.
Yeah, I've seen that happen.
It's 2 or 3, maybe 4 times a tour. Like, it's not. I'm ready for it every day. Just like that thing's he's gonna blast it out. But I always have his drum ready to go, and we can usually get that snare swapped out quick enough to where we don't have to say, "Hey, Jason, talk for a minute." We'll just.
But on a day in and day out with our jobs, we just keep checking things.
Yeah.
Stress on hardware. It's just
wow. Okay.
You just go over it 100 times.
Yeah.
Preventative maintenance. You see something kind of getting worn out, so that's real important.
Especially with the heavy hitter. I mean, Rich is, most people, if you haven't seen Rich play, look up anything you can find. I mean, he's just an animal of a drummer, he's hard on equipment. Yeah. So.
You don't want anything moving during the show.
No.
Just getting away from you.
Yeah.
And there's the seat. Is there anything else that a story or something that just had to be dealt with that was unique to your situation?
To be honest with you, that was the most craziest, unexpected thing that has happened to me. Like, a drummer's playing in front of 40, 50,000 people, and you see him falling. I was like, what's going on? Like, and then I run up, and the seat, one of the tripods, piece of metal broke.
That's crazy.
I can't imagine it being a cheap seat either.
No, I'm not going to mention any company names. No, it was a freak thing. I think it was a rivet that popped out. But I've been very fortunate. Like nothing really. John, what about you? Has anything really unusual or scary, crazy has happened?
Just one thing, we talk about that in a little bit. But as far as like gear goes, other than blowing out a head or breaking a cymbal, Rich, he sweats a lot, so his ears will clog up sometimes or get sweat. If he gets sweat in his ears, so we'll have to, swap out his in-ears, but we've got that down. It takes just a couple seconds to swap that out. So most of what we've had, go wrong on during a show is we can get it turned around quick enough to where the band doesn't really even know what's going on.
I know there was a performance. Was it American Idol where you weren't on the gig and he had to set up it was in L.A.
Yes.
So there's a situation where you weren't available and Rich had to set up drums himself. The drums showed up late. The band showed up late.
Yeah.
And with a TV show, there's a schedule there, and he had to literally get things set up in like 10 minutes.
Well, they were ready to do camera blocking, so the band came out. So usually, and Harry's done way more TV and award shows than I've done, but usually what'll happen is we will go up, we'll set the stage as normal, line check with the audio and the broadcast truck, make sure everything's good. And then when it's scheduled to do camera blocking rehearsals with the band, they walk out on stage and, okay, let's run it, let's camera block, and done. So they walk the band out at the camera blocking, basically like, hey, let's, sit down, get your ears in, okay, let's run this, check with the broadcast truck. And the gear wasn't set up. He came out to do camera blocking and the drums were in cases on the riser. So it was like,
that was a bad day.
Yeah. That was, it was the first year I worked with Jason, and they're, small crew. They're like, oh, we don't need to bring the drum. They were trying to basically get the crew down to as few people as they could, just for
I bet that never happened
or whatever.
Again.
Yeah, no. That didn't happen again. But it's just one of those things, like, you learn, like, oh, well, I guess we need everybody here so this doesn't happen again, So when Rich comes out ready to play and his drums are still in cases,
oh, boy.
That's bad.
Yeah.
Because then the whole
everything's
TV
off.
schedule's off then. So then, the producers of the show are like, what's going on? And, so you can't have that. Fortunately, I haven't been in that situation, where I've bumped the schedule. We've had some pretty tight turnarounds, and
I bet,
but we manage.
And you've got things dialed in such a way that you can get it set up. Whether it's the kit, you've got the memory locks, you've inserted fail safes to make that happen. Yeah,
and even if it's a rented drum set, where you're building everything from scratch, I've worked with Rich in a lot of different scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
And I know what he wants, and I can kind of do a second nature. So.
Also, the drum tuning, which we haven't really touched on, is a key part of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on, you get familiar what Rich likes and where he wants his snare drum. And I like to make sure that when the show starts, that the drum heads and the kit itself is going to sound just as good as at the end of the show when they start.
Yeah.
So I may jump up and and not be seen and just tighten the snare up.
Wow.
Things like that. It's not hard. But it's something that I pay attention to.
Yeah.
Sure.
Is there some advice or skills that somebody can be developing or be aware of if they're interested in doing some of the work that you guys are doing, whether it's Cartage or being a backline tech? What kind of skills can they be developing or be made aware of? I'm guessing, drum tuning. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just say, really know your equipment and be comfortable with it. I've worked for a lot of drummers even not on a professional level, that are kind of clueless with changing a drum head, or they're intimidated. Like anything else, you want to be confident.
Yeah.
So I would recommend, not that if your kit's set up at home or if you're playing locally, you need to change heads a lot, but it's not a bad thing to know not just how to do it, but experiment with different tunings. Like on the toms, if you want a real deep, lower sound, but you don't want the head to have a ripple in it.
Yeah.
Like, spend time with that.
Yeah.
Just like if you're going to practice, it's not a bad thing. To have that under your belt.
Yeah.
It's a key thing.
Even if you don't want to tech, I mean, just as a player, you want to be able to dial your drums to sound how you want them to sound.
Totally.
If you don't know how to do that,
it's a worthy endeavor. It's a good way, and it's so interesting that you say that. Even Billy Ward talks about that. It's like how I'm spending, say, the hour that I have set aside for practice time. It may not always be playing, but I mean, there's skills that you can develop.
You can acquire.
Yeah.
And I remember being a kid on like my first drum kit, and when I started playing with a band and I needed to change a snare head or a tom, I was like scared of it. Of course I didn't know, what I was trying to do. And yeah, it's one thing to put a drum head on, but to get it to sound that sweet spot.
Yeah.
And like anything else, the more you do it.
Right.
And through the years you develop, I'm very confident.
I bet.
Like in any situation, in the studio, live,
And knowing the specs of, say, even just for drum heads, to stay on that subject for a second, understanding like 2.7 mils, this is this brand, this is, Aquarian provides this for the drummers, this, and knowing the industry language, knowing what's available. And I imagine that you guys have developed something that maybe these drummers aren't necessarily aware of, that you can say, hey, I know you're going for this, but have you heard this? And maybe introduce something to them and be like, oh my gosh, that's what I've been waiting for. I mean, I know your job one is to meet the demands and the expectation of the client, but also to go above and beyond. If you have a strong understanding of your equipment and all these industry things, that you can bring something that maybe the drummer wasn't even expecting.
Yeah, I mean, we all know there's a lot of ways to manipulate a kit.
Yeah.
To get it to sound a certain way, and that's kind of the fun part of it.
Yeah.
Whether it's putting a T-towel on a drum, or the moon gels or tape, or no padding in the kick drum. Just spend the time with your equipment and experiment.
Yeah, just jump into deep into the pool, and
it's not a bad thing.
No, I mean, that's how I'm sure same thing for you, but I mean, that's how I learned just from being in high school. I was in jazz band and marching band and concert band, and it came time to change the heads on our bass line. It's like, guess who got to do it? And I was like, okay, here we go. And it's not an easy thing. Yeah. Tuning a two-sided, like a concert bass drum or marching, like, it's not an easy thing to tune 5 of those suckers to be at the right pitch and to sound exactly the same on both sides. And like, it's a challenge. And the more you do it, you get better at it, and you kind of know a little bit more what you're doing. But like, at first, it's not just you're not gonna wake up one day and be good at that. You've mentioned a couple times, and even to me personally, your experience doing the Super Bowl halftime show with Bruce. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, I will say that was probably the pinnacle, as far as it doesn't get bigger than that. And it was such an experience prior to the halftime performance. I didn't realize, but at the time it was in Tampa. We went down for rehearsal, and literally they have a drill sergeant or ex-Marine. I had heard he was in Vietnam. He was in charge of logistically getting the equipment where we were set up.
That's awesome.
And it rolled literally down a street and into the stadium and onto the field and off the field. We practiced it for a week.
Wow.
And I had no idea, obviously TV, commercials and all that, but it was such an amazing experience to see it all go down. And everything obviously is on rolling risers, but each musician that's on the on the riser with his equipment has a crew surrounding. There's 25 stagehands just for that, and there's 20 for my drum kit. And
oh wow,
it was awesome.
And you guys probably played live.
Yeah, and we got it out there, and
except for Bruce's vocals, they were all tracked.
I could. I just remember when the pyro went off at the end of the show. I think after Born to Run, I thought my arm was on fire. It was singed from the heat, but it was such a great experience. I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. And I mean, nowadays most bands don't even play live. They'll track live and then mine, but the singers will sing.
The audio analysts, I believe, did the audio. They won some kind of an award for it.
I bet.
Yeah. So
but it was Matt. It was one of the highlights. Just the whole experience of being involved with something that big. And that was another time where you're literally, I'm watching Max play at the time, and I was like, please don't let anything break. I mean, just...
Yeah,
did they feel the same way? I mean,
they were amped up. Yeah, it was a big deal for everybody involved.
That's really cool. I mean, to know that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Bruce.
Decades of massive touring and be like, hey, this will be fun.
Yeah.
Taking it that seriously.
Yeah. But, I don't know, John, what was one of your more excitable gigs? Again, I'm asking the question.
You're good at it, man.
He's a question asker.
I want to work.
Yes, sir. You want to make the big bucks.
AT&T, Cowboy Stadium.
Yeah, we've done some pretty cool gigs. We did
big one.
Co-headline tour with Kenny Chesney a few summers ago, where we did football stadiums, and that's a pretty cool. I mean, Harry did football stadiums for a decade with Bruce Springsteen, but that was like the first time that we did multiple shows, not just for an award show or a special event or a festival. That's a pretty exciting thing. I mean, you go out and it's like we did, at the AT&T Stadium down in Texas. It's a big place.
It's a funny thing, Matt, when you do a stadium gig as your technician and want to make sure everything's going to be good as it could be for your guy. It's a little tricky not to get caught up in the excitement and hype of it all, because when they open the doors and they let people in and you see that place fill up, but really it's gear and it's you're not flying the space shuttle. You know what I mean? It's not like we're trying to put somebody on the moon. It's a concert. It's a fun but there's so much ramps up during the day.
Yeah.
And I remember on a Springsteen show in a stadium, they sell the field. So it's not just putting people in the seats. It's like at a soccer stadium like in Europe.
That's old school, man.
Like the field. So it's 80, 100,000 people. But anyway.
It's crazy.
It gets pretty nuts when you're just trying to make it through the gig and get to the next gig.
Stay focused on.
The crowds are loud, too. Yeah. I mean, we did the Seattle football stadium with Chesney. It's like one of the loudest stadiums.
Right, it's right here.
I mean, in between songs, it's like, if Rich, hey, whatever, and the crowd's just, oh, I mean, you're like, dude, you gotta
But you guys have nonverbal communication happening as well.
Yeah. Which is helpful because, I mean, most of the band guys can walk over to a talkback while they're playing and say, hey, can I turn on my amp where I need a drink or I need whatever. Rich is using all four limbs.
Yeah.
And his drum set's super loud, so it's like if he needs something, he can't just stop and go, "Hey, can I, blah 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 blah." It's he kind of has to do some gesturing, and you got to keep a lookout and kind of pick up on the whatever he might need, whether it be a Q-tip, because his ears are clogged up, or an ice towel or something. If it's 100 degrees out there and he's halfway to a heat stroke, it's like you gotta.
I'm calling you for my next man.
He's the guy. He's the guy
for my little gigs that I'm passing out on, and in plugged up ears and all the things.
And by the way, he's not cheap.
Hey man, I play with the Matt Gray band. I can afford you.
Yeah, I know some of those guys.
Yeah, hacks, man.
A guitar player.
Guitar player. Let me ask you guys about electronics and how. Maybe as an example
what is that term?
Electronics. Maybe, or some other examples of how the industry has changed or evolved and how it affects the jobs that you do over time. Maybe from when you started to now.
I don't mean this as a joke, but Harry probably would be better to talk about.
I know there might be a window of time for you, but I know that there's been obvious.
We'll talk about it real quickly. When I started with Keith, with Chris McHugh, he had a rack behind him and with tracks.
Right.
And by the way, these guys can play their butts off. They don't need it. But we all know with pop music, it's become kind of part of the whole sound these days. And Chris taught me a lot, but as it evolved, they brought somebody in to just do that. Especially for TV shows or
this is a performer that's performing the electronics on stage, not behind the scenes loading discs and blah blah blah.
No, he's not doing that. I don't know if he would literally be set up on stage.
Oh, okay.
But maybe in the wing, and there's communication with him in the band.
Gotcha.
And, it's evolved quite a bit through the years.
It's a full-time gig, like being a tracks operator.
Many years ago, I worked with Bruce Hornsby in the Range, John Molo. They had an MPC 60 drum machine that they would use during, to play. And
well, yeah, it's just the way it is, man.
And then obviously the rolling pads and there's different variations of electronics, but I don't claim to be pretty old school. My forte is tuning and acoustics, but it's something you got to stay up on. There's always new gear coming out. It's crazy.
I imagine it's just like practicing your craft. You just need to know, be up on stuff.
Yeah.
It's hard because there's so much new gear and equipment coming out all the time. It's hard to keep up with all that. Usually what'll happen is, if you're on a gig and they have some equipment you haven't used before, it's like, okay, well, let me, look some stuff up in the manual or get familiar with this so I kind of know what I'm getting into.
Right.
I've done, a handful of sub gigs over the last couple of years. Go out with a pop band or with like All American Rejects or Young the Giant, like those kind of bands. They have their pop bands and they have tracks rigs, and you never know what you're getting into with that. So, like when I did the Young the Giant, like their tracks rig ran 2 keyboard rigs and 2 guitar rigs as well as the playback. So, when you're flying out day of a show, and you might get a couple pictures of how everything's set up, and the tech will kind of walk. He'll maybe call ahead of time, and here's what you're getting into, whatever. But you really don't know until you're there. So, you're running all these MIDI lines and going through the Ableton setup, and
and you've got to know which. So and it's not one size fits all with different brands and then different programs. Ableton's going to run differently if they're running other types of DAWs and different things like that.
And even just with one program like Ableton, I mean, the possibilities of what you can do are endless.
I've used Ableton just to generate a click, and it's a click track if the drummer wants it.
Yeah.
And it's a great tool. And
I hear nothing but great things about Ableton and its ease of use, especially in a live situation, even though that's what it wasn't its original intent, but it has become the go-to for live tracks. The thing about Ableton, my understanding is that it can be customized so much so that when you come into a new situation, it could look completely different than the Ableton rig you used the week before.
Yeah. And
I think if you are that guy that needs to be ahead of the game to get the job done, you've got to know 110% of the stuff that's happening.
Yeah. I would just say for all your drummers out there, it's a must to have some experience with your computer generating some kind of loop or click track. So you need to be prepared if you're on a session. Hey, they may ask you to do that for them, or play live and generate some kind of click track for the band.
Yeah.
Or tracks. So I'm sure most of the listeners know that, but it's never ends. There's always stuff coming out, new stuff, new gear.
And it's easy to get intimidated, but it is interesting and to assert yourself in a way that you know that you can figure this stuff out. I've shared this story before. I had a producer who says, hey, we're working on some new stuff and we're building tracks. Can you build tracks? And I was like, oh, yeah, of course, because I'm trying to make myself valuable and an essential part of the team that's being built around this new artist. I left the rehearsal and called my friend and said, dude, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, you got to help me, because I have a guru. I have connections with people that can help me if I need it, and then get me started. Well, 2 years later, I'm building tracks. I've become a part of the team, and it's not as complex as what
you didn't shy away from it because you were intimidated. You dove in,
and it's like, well, it's not how I came up, or we didn't use that. No, when I think electronics and different things like that to remain relevant, to be a working part of this community. You can't shy away
essential.
from things that you don't know.
Well, you did the right thing too, and I mean, something you touched on, like you reached out to somebody it's like they can help you, rather than go, oh, I'm just going to figure this out on my own, and maybe take a chance in botching the gig. Yeah. You reached out and prepared.
I wanted to ask you about your work with Jeff Porcaro, and of course, I know you've worked with so many different wonderful players, and there's so many huge fans of Steve Gadd and Jeff Porcaro, and you've worked with both of these guys. But is there anything that you might be able to share?
Jeff.
Yeah, I think we all do.
We all do. Sweetheart, magical time, great memories. And for the record, I wasn't his only tech there for a long time. Paul Jameson was Jeff's guy back in the early days, and then Gary Grimm worked with him, and then Gary went off and I jumped in. Man, like, what could I say? Going on the road with Toto and sitting behind Jeff, and incredible. I worked with him a little bit in the studio on a Madonna record, and just blew my mind what he could do physically playing,
Anything unique about what he needed from you?
Yeah, he told me when I first worked for him, hey babe, make sure you got my cigarettes and my lighter. Seriously.
Yeah.
And he said, it's going to be great. It's going to be great. We're going to have a blast. And we did. And I'll tell a quick funny story. They did a gig in Puerto Rico opening up for Rod Stewart. I have a picture of Jeff and I at that gig. And it was Backline rental, local gear. And when I got there and looked at the drum kit, I was like, oh, geez. You've heard of that expression, polishing a turd.
Yeah, right.
I knew to have drum heads. I put heads on the kit and got it pretty dialed in. And I was waiting for Jeff to show up for sound check. And I was like, ooh, I got to break the news to him. This kid is pretty beat up. And he comes in. He says hi to the guys in the band. I let him do his thing. Walks back to me. How we doing? I said, Jeff, this kid. He looked at it and went, it's going to be great, babe. It's playing wave. That's what he said. Playing wave. And the story is he just didn't affect him at all. The great players.
Yes.
And we know, not to start naming names, but there are certain guys that could sit down behind any kit in any situation, and they can play it like, they're throwing for 5 touchdowns on a Sunday.
Wow.
So great memories, and Steve Gadd was such an awesome opportunity. I did a lot of work with Rick Marotta through the years, and Rick recommended me to work with Steve. When I first worked with Steve, it was at a session at Ocean Way in LA, and this is back in the day when guys brought in 20 snare drums, 25, and those big snare trunks.
Yeah.
Like that. That's just what you did. And Rocket Cargo got the stuff to the studio, and I went in to set up Steve, and I opened up his snare case, his little snare case, and there were 2 snare drums, and they were both the same drums. Superphonic 400, where the head was on for a couple of years.
Right. Hey, I have that.
And I realized that's what you get when you hire Steve. Steve didn't order additional equipment to have there.
Yeah.
It was his kit with his snare drums. But I ended up, Matt, working with him on some sessions, and then I went on the road with him with Al Jarreau, which was, think about that. I grew up listening to these guys and idolizing Jeff Porcaro and Steve Gadd, and as a drum tech, they trust me to take care of their equipment and make sure it's right, and then to sit behind them. You have to. What happened to me is I'd get caught up in the show musically, and I'd kind of be daydream, drifting off, watching them play, and I'd have to catch myself going, pay attention.
Right.
Watch, making sure nothing's going to go wrong here, because I was in awe watching them play every night.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was great.
That would be a challenge, just to be like the crowd, to see everything, just be like, wait, I got to be on point. Constant.
And just incredibly down to earth, humble human beings, never full of themselves, never taking themselves so seriously. So that made an impression on me.
Yeah.
To be those guys and to do what they've achieved, and to really have, be humble about it.
To carry that with you throughout all that you do.
It's a special thing.
Yeah, and back around what you said earlier, takeaways. There's a lot of unspoken things like that you learn from people. Mm-hmm. Just things that they don't necessarily say to you, or things that are,
for example,
easy to verbalize. Like just what Harry was, just being a humble person and having a great attitude of making the best out of a terrible situation. Going into that Puerto Rico gig and going, it's going to be great, and they it doesn't faze them. That's you learn from those little experiences. So it's things that you take with you, and if you're in a crappy situation like that again,
you got to make it work.
Yeah,
whatever you're dealt with as a player, right?
Right. That's the and that's
Matt. You play, and if you're at a gig and you had to use a kit, and it's what is it going to do by you being angry and throwing a fit?
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
And drag down other people around me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put you in a bad headspace.
Yeah, and it does not make you the type of player or person that other people want to be around, to be able to handle situations and all their forms. And when you travel and when you are in different venues, just going back to Billy Ward again, I mean, it's like you need to be best on your worst days. And I think attitude, that rules.
It's a key part of what we do because we're working with a lot of people day in and day out, and we're living on a bus with them.
Yeah.
And there's always one in the group that's complaining about the food or how long the bus ride is. Or
you don't want to be that guy.
You don't want to be that guy. Fly under the radar, keep your mouth shut, and take the paycheck.
Yep.
Right, because we've had worse jobs.
Yeah,
we've all had jobs.
Right. You can be reminded of that real quick when you get fired.
It's a hard life.
Oh, yeah.
There's a part of it. It really needs to be in your blood because you're sacrificing being away from your family. Yes. You got kids. You're missing things, cheerleading, dance recitals. I missed a lot when my daughter was growing up, and I had to work through that. Felt bad and guilt, but then I provided a great life for my family. Yeah. Now she's older, and I can get some of that back and make it up. But eating healthy is not easy to do.
No.
Now on a real tour, on a big touring year, John and I are lucky enough to work for artists that take out their own catering. But sometimes if you're doing a fair or festival and you're eating local catering, it's really tough. And there's a lot of downtime because you go in early in the morning. There's 4 or 5 bands on the concert that night. So you'll set up and you'll roll back so the other bands can sound check, and you have hours.
It's easy to slip into bad habits.
Very easily. And I've seen guys, eat too much, drink too much, sleep too much, start, not on the tour that I'm on now, but years ago, boy, I saw a lot of guys and then they have an attitude like it's a party. It's not that either.
No.
It's a real job, and the traveling is brutal now. Going through an airport.
Oh, yeah.
And flying all day to get to a gig and then turning around and coming home.
Or long bus rides,
So my point is it's not as glamorous as it could sound. We make it out to sound sometimes, but it's also
what's seen on the outside. But when you check off those boxes, okay, I'm going to make sure I don't overdo these things. I have me time. I'm taking care of myself physically and nutritionally to handle the times that I'm going to be flying or on a bus that it's like an incubator for viruses and all these things. You can power through and take away the best of what it is that drew us to this industry, for sure. One last question. Any advice that you would give your younger self? I know that's just a few years ago for you.
Oh, I hate that you said that. I'm kidding. Go ahead, John.
I'll put me on the spot.
Johnny on the spot. Wait, no, that's a company. That's our new sponsor.
Any advice?
Maybe, hey, listen, don't do this. Or maybe advice you wish you had. Or you just nailed it, man. You've just been doing everything.
I've been
places.
I've been really fortunate with the people that I've had in my life. So I've had a lot of support from friends and family, and I've been really fortunate to know some people that have been in the music industry for a long time, and they've passed a lot of really great advice, and I think that's helped me out a lot.
Yeah.
Rather than learning from all of your own mistakes, for decades, you can take little bits and pieces of information that those that have come before you can pass along, and you can learn from those things and know, well, don't this is probably not a good idea to do this, or this is a better way to handle this situation. So, I mean, I guess the advice that I would have given myself would be to use my ears a little bit more and listen to people that have had more experience.
And it sounds like you've done that, and that's served you well.
Yeah, and when you're younger, I think you're a little bit more closed-minded when you're younger.
Of course,
you think, oh well, I'm going to do it differently, or whatever. But I would say, just sit back and listen to other people's advice, and don't be afraid to ask questions, and don't pretend like you know more than you do. I think it's better to play ignorant and listen, even if somebody's giving you information that you might already know. Still sit back and listen, and you just be a sponge and listen, take in everything you can.
I honestly don't think that goes away.
Right.
I think
no,
there's always,
it never does.
And I'm at a point now where, of course, I've the luxury of having the podcast. I get to talk to lots of, and so many players are younger than me, or I get advice from people that are in the industry but have different experiences than me, and they don't have to necessarily be older than me to really take that in. So, I mean, you're coming at it at a place early in life when you started with Rich. But I think it's good to know that even for people that are older, to not close to stay open to advice and information from people of all ages, and then figure it out from there. Yeah.
My advice, it took me years to learn this, but don't react hastily or too fast to a situation that you're not happy about. Whether it's a coworker, you're working with a lot of people. If something happens, before you open your mouth and react, I mean, you can apply this even at home with your family, because we all know we kind of wish we hadn't said things right away. But that's a hard thing to do.
Right.
Especially with what we do, like somebody taking a case that you need and was pushed to the other side of the arena, and you're like, where's my snare case? What are you guys doing? Like, it's easy to tee off on somebody. But it's discipline to just handle it a different way, to not be an ass about it.
Especially,
it's hard to do.
Especially with stagehands. It might be your 50th show.
They're people.
But it's their first time.
Like, we go into these places and we see some rough-looking people, and,
especially local crew that don't know you.
Well, they don't know your gear, and, they don't know what you need.
But you could tell they don't have a lot going on, and I don't want to get sidetracked into talking about local stagehands, but they're people too.
Well, yeah.
Make them feel good about their job and what they're doing, because we need them too. But me, on a personal level, I've reacted too swiftly with getting news, whether it's with Drum Paradise, like, oh, I got bad news. We just backed into a car. You know what I mean? Like an employee, like there's always things you have to deal with. So try and, before you open your mouth,
assess the situation and figure out the best way to handle it.
I think that's good advice.
Yeah. That's good.
Wow,
Guys,
I think we're getting ready to wrap it.
Yeah.
It sounds like a wrap here. And I'm looking to work with this guy over here. If anybody could call in or write in, I'd like to be Matt's assistant and ask a few questions.
That's right.
No, I didn't mean to step on your toes.
No, not at all. John, Harry, I appreciate you guys very much for doing this.
I hope some of the information is...
One thing I will add for people listening, I know we can't take live questions right now. I'm sure other people have questions.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions. I mean, everybody's on social media these days.
Yeah.
Everybody has an email address. It's easy to get that information. Like, if you have questions, reach whether it's for us or for me or whoever or somebody that you idolize. Like, don't be afraid to reach out with a question.
We've had, and that's great that you remind me to share with the listeners that there's always opportunities to reach any of the guests and any of us, even if you can remember, email addresses and Instagram handles. You can find us. I've had people reach out to me about guests that from 2 years ago and said, "Hey, I need to get a hold of so-and-so for that book I can't find anymore online." And I'm able to reach out to all of our guests and everybody. So if anybody's listening and has a question for John or Harry, you can find it at workingdrummer.net. You can find us on Facebook or Instagram. Does anybody, you're at drumparadise.net. So, I mean, there's contact information on the website. What's your contact information? We always have links in our show notes that you can tap on your phone or on the website too. So but that's a great thing.
Instagram, Drum Paradise Nashville, or drumparadise.com.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or the drumpad.com. Same thing. You can submit an email on drumpad.com. Yeah. So I'm fairly active on Instagram as well, which is Johnny Fletch Drums. So if you can put that link in there, if somebody wants to reach out, and I try to do like short tech tips.
JohnnyFletch.com, JONNY Fletch.com. Yeah.
The man.
Yeah.
The kid.
The legend.
He loves being the kid. Hey, Matt, thanks for
change.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
See ya.
Peace out.
Many thanks to John and Harry for taking some time to speak with us about their work and their thoughts on drum teching and just being entrepreneurial in a variety of ways in this business. Harry has been super kind to the podcast in making his space available for us. If you see the video on YouTube of the 200th episode and the 2 parts that we have filmed at the Drum Pad, we also did some filming for this interview. It doesn't look fancy. I'm going to throw some graphics on there, and it's going to be essentially what you're hearing now, the audio, and it's going to be available hopefully within the next week, but we wanted to get the audio portion of this episode out right away to you. We're experimenting with some video work so that we can bring you the occasional live interview with an interactive audience with the use of that facility that Harry and John are putting together. Next week, Zach Albetta's interview. He has interviewed Johnny Radalat, Gary Clark Jr.'s drummer. Stay tuned for that next week. Also, don't forget, check out our Patreon page. We've got little educational tidbits that we are offering from past guests. We have just started doing this. Right now, the thing that's up there is practicing tips from Ben Caesar. We've got some other things coming, some additional PDFs, videos, and other things that we want to reward our patrons with. So if you are not a Patreon member, you will not be able to access these fun things and educational things. But if you are a Patreon member, even at $1 a month, you can have access to these things, and just our way of saying thanks for offering your support to what Zach and I are doing here at the Working Drummer Podcast. We appreciate you all interacting and listening, and keep in touch. Bye-bye.